Welcome to the Cook Group's podcast, What's Cooking in Litigation, with your host, Brian Wacker. In each episode, you'll meet industry leaders, innovators, and educators in litigation. We'll discuss the latest advancements, efficient practices, and strategic updates. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, cookgrouplegal.com. Now here's the host of What's Cooking in Litigation, Brian Wacker.
Hello, and welcome back to What's Cooking in Litigation. I am your host, Brian Wacker. Once again, each week we are breaking down latest trends in litigation and chatting with some of the sharpest minds in the industry, including those within our own firm, the Cook Group. We spent the past few weeks getting to know folks at different offices in the Cook Group, and I think we are rounding out the tour of America, finally getting to speak with someone from our illustrious Chicago office, my partner and all-star partner, Meredith Hudgens. Meredith, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for that lovely intro, Brian. Good to be here and speaking with everyone.
I spent all day writing it, I promise.
Seems like it.
Yeah, right. So, Meredith, we've each of these episodes we've sort of tried to get a little bit of background on everyone before kind of diving into a little bit more of your specialty and what you do up in Chicago. So, can you introduce yourself and kind of let us know how you got to this point in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. Born and raised in Elgin, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. Went to law school at John Marshall in the city. And had my first legal job at Cookin & Conway, which is a plaintiff's asbestos firm. And from there, started off my track on doing asbestos work. So I've been doing it actually since, I think, 2006 is the intro that I had to asbestos. And I've been working on those and defending those cases ever since. When I graduated law school, I switched over to the defense side, realized that there was some science and research behind some of these things that needed to come into play.
Get out of here.
The usual. But so, and so pleased about 4 years ago, Jackie Miller and I started the Chicago Cook Group office and have been working ever since to continue to provide some great legal services in the Illinois jurisdiction.
All right. Well, before diving into that, I just have to clarify something. You are a White Sox fan?
I am a White Sox fan, but I really try to post I'm a Bears fan instead.
Oh, that's right. All right, good. Well, we can talk more about that a little bit later. So, all right. So you've been based in Cook County your entire career, and it seems to me that Cook County, of all things in my career, and I think you and I are about of the same experience now. Cook County is one of those places that the more you try to explain it to people, the harder it gets, because Cook County is a place that's always changing, but there's always been a mountain of litigation up there. Can you kind of give us the primer of Cook County and what it is that you experience every day and that folks outside the jurisdiction should know?
Yeah. So interestingly, Illinois is ranked 6-ish among states for nuclear verdicts. And I believe 2/3 of those are found in Cook County. Those verdicts range from about $10 million to about $363 million is the top verdict that has gone in Cook County. We've recently had a few asbestos verdicts that have been in the $40 million range. We had a $20 million and then a couple that just hit close to $8 million. So we are a high risk jurisdiction for potential nuclear verdicts. And so it's put us on the map. I think Cook County has entered into the top 5 of judicial hellholes and maybe even beating out Madison County and St. Clair County while they still are in the mix. Yeah, the Cook County has made a name for itself, and it's in part because of the nuclear verdicts that are coming down. There's a very, very high risk for big verdicts, and people are starting to pay more attention to what's going on here.
Yeah. Now, is part of, in my understanding, of the danger of being a defendant, or at least on the dark side in Cook County, is it's a combination of a few things. One of which is you've got a massive jury pool, massive population that's probably pretty diverse. But then Chicago is a city of industry, right? At its core, there was industry, the steel all manner of industry there that you're just going to have more exposure and more cases that arise out of there, which kind of creates its own ecosystem of bigger verdicts.
Yeah, absolutely. We've also been seeing some out of town, we'll call them plaintiffs' counsels, come to Cook County and experiment a little bit on what kind of cases that they can bring here. There is a lot of industrial entities, like you mentioned. U.S. Steel is just around the corner. We have a lot of steel industries around the Chicago area, which brings a lot of steel trades, pipe fitter trades, and whatnot. And so we can see a lot of rise in lung cancer cases that are kind of hitting those sites.
Yeah, that's one of the things I spoke about with Gary last week, our partner Gary Casimir, talking about sort of what used to be sort of at least in the asbestos world, you usually, the vast majority of these cases were brought for a very specific disease that was more easily attributable to exposure to asbestos. Mm-hmm. That's changing a lot now, and we're starting to see a lot more other diseases and other afflictions being alleged to be associated with that. You seeing that a lot in Cook County as well?
Yeah, we've seen a rise in lung cancer cases. We've also seen a rise in colon cancer cases, which, we would argue on the defense side, there is not a medical link to asbestos exposure, but there are some plaintiffs experts out there that tie it in. So it brings those cases in here. It's really tough to get to win on a motion for summary judgment here in Cook County. The facts and the stars kind of have to align more perfect than usual, and maybe in some other jurisdictions. And so it's tough. It's tough to get out of these cases. And so that's playing a factor in Cook County as well. I should also mention there's been a couple of changes in law in Illinois recently. One, our governor signed a law that allows punitive damages to go against defendants in wrongful death cases. Before, it was just for living plaintiffs. That has sort of piqued additional plaintiffs' counsels wanting to file cases here. As you know, there are some deceased plaintiffs that we have. And so that was maybe a benefit to Illinois law on the defense side, but we no longer have that. And then also the law changed with regard to the ability to sue the employer. The statute of limitations no longer applies to asbestos cases if the exposure took place longer than 25 years from the date of their last employment. So we're starting to see more cases coming into against employers as well. So it's definitely making it a big eye for plaintiffs' counsels here.
Right. One of the things I've mentioned with Gary, and I mentioned elsewhere as well, is that you and I have probably been hearing for the majority of our career that asbestos litigation was plateauing, and that at some point it's going to cascade down and we're all going to be without jobs, and we should try to diversify and find something else to get a specialty in. And in reality, for the 17 years I've been practicing, it's the opposite has happened. The asbestos world is diversifying itself. And I think we're seeing that all around. It sounds like that in Chicago as well.
Yeah. And what's interesting about asbestos cases is that the meso diagnosis has stayed steady, even though they were predicting that they were going to go down, that we still continued to see the same number of filings and the same number of diagnoses. So it presents an interesting thing. And yeah, lung cancers, there's a lot more lung cancers, and those are keeping the litigation, I think, steady. So definitely playing a part in that.
Right. So shameless plug. I know that you are involved in, if not the presenting, one of the presenters in a CLE or something to this effect, talking about everything we've been talking about so far today. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So the Cook Group is teaming up with the Parent Conference, and we are hosting the Cook County Asbestos Litigation Conference on May 19th. It's taking place at the Midland Hotel in Chicago. And it goes from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. And just before that, we will be doing a women's lunch to kind of highlight what it means to be a woman in this litigation. So I encourage everyone who's listening to come and check it out. We will have Judge Sherlock, our presiding judge, and Judge Boyle also attending and commenting and talking about procedures and motion practice. So it will be a really nice afternoon to get people to understand Cook County a little better.
And if I'm a lawyer, my ears are perking up. CLE comes out of it too, right?
Yeah, you get some CLE out of there. I can't tell you exactly how much that is, but I'm going to bet it's somewhere around 4 hours.
Yeah,
that's my guess.
I just got my emails recently telling me I need to get all that done before before a couple dates certain. So I may tap into that.
You gotta stay on top of that.
Right,
You gotta
right.
stay on top of that.
Well, you talked about women in the law, and so that was one of the other topics I wanted to speak to you about. Obviously, the Cook Group is something that, and this is not just shameless plugging, it's actually something we put into, in real practice. We're a woman-owned firm. We're about as diverse of a firm as you're going to find. Is that something that really appealed to you guys when you came over? And can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's a different, some people might call it's a different vibe. It's a different structure over here. And so it's great to be on a team that is female based and trying to, promote women in this litigation. So it's very attractive. It's great for employment opportunities too, to say that, hey, we're a women and minority owned firm, and we care about those issues, and we want to make sure that we are helping each other and work with each other. And I think it's a great model to be under. So we've really appreciated it.
Yeah, great. I mean, on my end, I think it's great for 1,000 different reasons, but not least of which is I just think there's a few too many balding fat guys in the profession. And I think we can, if for any reason, let's dilute the amount of us that there are out there. So, all right. So we talked about Cook County. You're active elsewhere though too, right? You and I have handled some cases down in St. Louis County and Madison County as well. Is there anything about the sort of the looking at the different jurisdictions, especially looking at it from a asbestos attorney, but also just as a defense attorney, more globally, are there any sort of high level trends that you're seeing in terms of either jury pools, those nuclear verdicts you talked about, judges, how they're sort of their patience for this type of litigation? Are there any sort of those sort of trends that you're seeing that you think are worthwhile to talk about in any of those jurisdictions?
Well, I think one of the things, and it comes from the medical side, that's really important to start noticing is that the science is really developing on the treatment for mesothelioma. And so plaintiffs and individuals who've been diagnosed with mesothelioma, if they qualify for certain types of immunotherapy, there are some really good studies going on and treatments going on that are really prolonging life. And so I think one of the trends that we're going to see from that is hopefully that we will not have plaintiffs that are passing away from this disease, but we will typically see, I think, from that an expansion of damages, because the treatment is very expensive. It is something that, takes a lot of time. So I do think we'll see a rise in damages from those types of treatments. But on the flip side, I think we'll see plaintiffs living longer with the diagnosis of mesothelioma. So I think that's something to take a look at. It's something that's, definitely on the rise. There's a couple of individual medical facilities like Hetty Kindler at University of Chicago is doing some groundbreaking work with immunotherapy. I know Texas MD Anderson is doing something similar. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out in the litigation nationwide.
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed, and I do practice in asbestos work, but I practice in general liability as well, is that in this age of everybody having all of human knowledge in the pocket, with a click away on their phone, that there is so much more out there now in the sort of public ether of what people think they do and don't know about what's being tried to a jury. So if you were sitting in front of 12 jurors, what used to be that they had no idea what was going on, they can go home that night, Google everything they just heard that day, even though the judge tells them not to.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got 12 sort of armchair quarterbacks and armchair doctors or scientists coming up. And I find that very challenging. And it's something that how do you even prepare for it as you're getting ready for trial, right? I imagine that is even more so in the asbestos realm, because all you have to do is Google mesothelioma, and it's a lot of the plaintiffs' firms coming up first with what they're saying about it, not a lot of what the defense firms and maybe even reality is saying on the other end.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely a huge challenge. It's one of those challenges that you have to try to convince a jury that, hey, we know you can find this information right now, but you need to understand that the time period that the plaintiff was exposed and that these companies existed, that knowledge was not present. And so that's one of the things that you really have to work hard on. And that's why I think at the Cook Group, we do such a good job of trying to think outside the box and trying to implement litigation plans that develop stories for the companies that we represent, and that put sort of a human story to it behind its owners, and creating a narrative that is accurate, and that allows a jury to say, hey, it's not just all, doom and gloom here. Let's go back to what was at the time. These are honest. This is an honest company that does X, Y, and Z. At the time, no one knew that this gasket contained this. It's really important to develop those narratives for your client before you get to trial.
Yeah. I don't want to say frustrating, because it's always been a challenge of it, but it is you're going to have a diversity of opinions on a 12-person jury. But nowadays, especially where everybody has just decided that they need to have an opinion on every single thing in the world at any given point, I think just makes it a little more difficult. All right. So we've got a few minutes left. I do have a couple other questions to ask you.
Great. Let's bring it.
If you'll indulge. All right. So you are you're a White Sox fan, but more so a Bears fan.
Yes, that's true.
What are our thoughts on Chicago style pizza? You don't have to be a homer just because it's Chicago style, but where are we on that?
Chicago style pizza depends, because there are Chicagoans who will say deep dish is the only kind of pizza, but there's a tavern style pizza that Chicago also likes to claim to fame, which is a very thin crust pizza. So I think it depends on what you're saying. Now, if you are going to be in Chicago and you're having some deep dish pizza, I am personally a Lou Malnati's buttercrust fan, but everybody has their own opinions on that. So
I've never been one to malign pizza of any kind, even here in St. Louis, where it's even charitably called pizza sometimes with our cracker style pizza that we have.
Bechamel cheese.
Yeah, Provel cheese, if you can call it that. No, but I'm a massive fan of Chicago style pizza, especially Lou Malnati's. If you get the sausage where it's just like an entire layer of sausage on the pizza, I think it's just fantastic.
Yeah. That's really good.
All right. So sort of wrapping up, if you had the opportunity to sort of look 3, 4, 5 years in the future, and we've talked about sort of trends where things are at this point, do you see this sort of wave that continues? I mean, the ebbs, there really haven't been any ebbs. It's been mostly flow on the asbestos litigation. Do you see anything, whether it's regulatory or governmental or congressional action, that could ultimately change the trajectory of where this is? Or do you think that, given the sort of institutions that are out there with plaintiffs' firms and with a lot of these jurisdictions that have really created their own dockets and systems for asbestos litigation, do you see that sort of continuing on and calcifying even more?
I think it's probably going to calcify before it gets, before maybe it gets worse. I think it would be fantastic if we could get even just a little bit of tort reform to allow these nuclear verdicts to get shortened, or a way to kind of address that before it even gets to the jury, so that there's limits on what we can do. I know plaintiffs fight vigorously to not have that, but that's something that I think would definitely help, but I don't really see in particular in Illinois happening anytime soon. And we rarely see it around the country. So
well, all the more reason to have learned and experienced counsel in all these places to be able to navigate it and be able to manage risk as much as try cases at this point, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that was maybe the most perfect timing of any of these podcasts that we've done, because as I asked you that question, we hit 20 minutes. So I promised you that I'd only take up 20 minutes of your time, and I'm going to keep myself to that promise. So Meredith, we really do appreciate you joining us today. A lot of insight, we'll hope that we get as many people up to the parent conference up in Chicago in a couple weeks, and appreciate your time, and keep fighting the good fight.
All right. Thanks so much for having me, Brian.
All right. And that is it for another episode of What's Cooking in Litigation. Again, thanks for tuning in. If you've enjoyed the content, please be sure to like and share the content on LinkedIn, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, we will we'll see you then. All right.
See you then. Bye.
You've been tuning in to the Cook Group's podcast, What's Cooking in Litigation, with your host, Brian Wacker. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, cookgrouplegal.com. Thank you for sharing this show with others.